So, my name is Miroslav Bajtoš, and I'm here to tell you something about debugging Node.js applications. Short bio. I'm writing code for a long time. Mostly I'm very serious about test-driven development and clean code. And I'm from Czech Republic, and I love bad jokes. So, about debugging. First thing I would like to tell you, when you need to start your debugger, you failed. So you should use debugger only as the last resort. And the reason for that is that debugging your application is very slow, very time consuming, and it's like very manual. And why should we do manual things when we can automate? And the first thing which you can use to help you is test-driven development. What a surprise. And the benefits which you will gain, there are multiple. First of them is that you are working in small increments and you have very fast feedback cycle, which means that even if something stops working, there is only a few minutes of your work which you can throw away if you cannot find the problem quickly enough. And also there is only small amount of code which you change, so there's only few places where the bugs can hide. So that's the first thing I would like to advise you. The second thing you can use is debug logging. So instead of running the debugger and trying to find out the variable values and who knows what, you can instrument your code with debug logs. And the nice thing about debug logs is that they are not being printed unless you enable debug output. So for example, with the module called debug, you can see, colors, sorry. So you can see we are requiring debug and giving a name to our debugging function. So it's application main and application module. We have two debug functions. And you have to tell your application what kind of debug logs you are interested in. So in my first example, you are asking only for debug logs from your main function, and you will see only the one debug log is printed. And in the second example, I'm asking from everything from application. And if I do not specify debug environment variable, nothing is printed at all. So in your production, there is no overhead, but when you need to debug, you can selectively turn on the information you are interested in. And when everything else failed, you can use Node Inspector, which is the main thing I would like to show you today. Let's start with a simple example I prepare. So let's say we have a small Node application for running your blog. It's MongoDB based and looks like a blog. And let's look into the source code and see what's going under the hood. So I would start a debugger, just slc debug, the name of your application. Okay. Usually when you open it on your desktop, the font will not be that big and you will have more space to see your source code and everything. So let's look at what our application looks like. We have lots of node modules. It's Express based, so we have some routes. Nothing really interesting. We have database. We are using MongoDB connector. We have defined a few model classes, like we have comments, we have blocks, we have logs, yep. And we have users, so we can log into the blog. And now let's say I would like to change my blog so that when I write a comment like hello world, I would like to see not only the username, the name of the user who posted the comment, but also the IP address where he of the computer where he posted the blog from. So let's get to the code. I believe it's in the routes. Index.js here. Yep. So when we are creating a new comment object, we are setting author, we are setting IP address and the comment body, and then we are sending it to Mongo. And what we also need to change is the view. So prepared. Just uncomment span. Okay. Now I can run my application again. And let's try to write another comment. Hello again. Oh, and the IP address is undefined, and I don't know why. So let's try to debug the application a little bit to see what's going on. I will find the route for posting a comment. It's called, hey, post comment. I will set the breakpoint just by clicking on the line number. And now I will send another comment, whatever. And now we can see the page is loading because the Node.js process has been stopped. It's waiting on our breakpoint. And here in Node Inspector, we can see the source code and where we are. Now, the Node Inspector supports all the usual debugging things which you would expect from any debugger. So we can step over, you can step inside, you can inspect what are the variable values. You can just hover to see the post ID. We can see the remote address. We can see the username. Okay, and I will just do a bit debugging now. So here we are calling block.update. Let's step inside to see what's going inside. Okay, this was remembered. And now a nice thing you can use is watch expression, so we can see the value of a property you are interested in. So let's look what is it in docs. It will even offer you suggestions because it can understand the content of the variable. So I can just use tab or right arrow. And I think it's comments, yeah. So we can see the object which we are storing into the database still contains our author IP. So let's just move through the code to see what's going on. Now here we are creating a query to update the document. Let's step over. We apply name scope, whatever it is, and then we call query update. So let's step into to see what's going in. We are casting the query, casting the document. Oh, and now we can see that the author IP is gone. So probably the trouble is in the way how we are casting the document. And now it gets very manual because, well, the information is gone. So I will just resume the execution and then type another, or maybe set a breakpoint. That would be even better.
So I noticed you're setting breakpoint without pausing application. Somehow in my Node Inspector I have to pause and then, or have to do right click to be able to set breakpoints. Is it
that's weird
version or works for you?
Don't know.
All right.
I haven't encountered it. If you can create like a small sample where we can reproduce the problem, then just report the GitHub issue and we will look into it.
Okay.
This will be the best way. Okay, so let's enter yet another comment. This was the first breakpoint. We can cancel it. And here we are casting the document. It's calling, well, whatever. Cast update is MongoDB internals. We don't really want to get into that. And my point here is where we call walk update path. It's doing something with schema. And we can check that the schema option is true. And now it rings a bell. Because with this MongoDB adapter, you have to define your database schema so it can validate that you are not storing random properties. So now I know how to fix the problem. I will not show you all the source where it's happening, but it helped me to figure out where the problem is. So let's look into models, and it's called block. And you see you have to define in the comment schema the author IP property. So now it should work. Let's restart the page. Yep. Okay. Our breakpoint was hit again. So I'll just let it run. And then now I should see that the IP address was filled. Wow, problem solved. There are a few more things I would like to show you about Node Inspector, which you might find useful. The first thing is Command plus O. So where you want to open a file and you do not want to search for it in a deep hierarchy tree of all your JavaScript files, you can use Command plus O, or on Windows it's, I think, Control plus O, and you can just type block.js, and here is my model. What you also can use when you have your JavaScript file open, you can use Command Shift plus O to navigate to a function by a name, which is quite handy as well. And the last thing I would like to show you is editing variable values. So we are. So what we also can do here in the scope variables, you will see all scopes. So there is local scope of our function, there is closure scope, there is global scope, there are lots of objects in the global scope. But what you can do, you can edit the variable value directly as you are debugging. So let's call our user John. And now you just can continue with the execution, and the new value will be used for you. And another nice thing which you can do, which you might find useful at some point, you can restart the current function. So if you change, for example, variable values, and you would to run the code again without going in the UI and clicking all the workflow you need to get into your function, you can just restart frame, and the whole function should be restarted for you.
What was the key? How did you do your restart frame?
You just click in the call stack on your function, and then it's right click, or it's Control plus the single button on your Apple mouse. Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure why it didn't restarted it in the way how it should, but yeah, trust me, it works usually. Okay, that's it. Oh, well, just continue the execution, and now we should see the username was not changed because I restarted the frames. Okay, last try, and then we will move on. So let's say comment. You can even use, you can even reference other objects here. So I can see author is console.long, which is a function, right? You don't have to use strings only. But I will play nicely with my application. It's not expecting console log as author. Okay, I'll just continue, and now we should see the new content. So that's editing variable values. Now, you notice that when you find a bug, you need to switch into your editor, then restart the application. It's a bit annoying. So one more thing which you can do with Node Inspector is called live edit. So you can edit your source code directly in your debugger. So for example, I would like to change the author name to contain @ because it looks more like Twitter, so it's more cool. Well, let's do it. All I need to do is just add @+. You can see in the small asterisk, it's telling you that the file was not saved to your node runtime, so you just hit save, or we just Alt+S, or you can just do save. And now we get a warning that we saved it only to your node runtime, but it wasn't saved to your file, which is disabled by default as some kind of security, but you can enable it in the configuration file, in which case all the changes will be persisted to your file, so you can use Node Inspector as your IDE for editing your files. So that's sort of nice. And now when I create yet another comment, it should contain the modified username containing the @ at the beginning. Okay, how much time do we have? A few more minutes. So, two more things to show. How many of you tried to debug Mocha unit tests? Mocha unit tests? Was it easy? Okay, so let me show how you can debug them using the latest Node Inspector version. We have some tests for for our blog application. So the way how you usually run your test, you just run Mocha, right? Or actually it's in the node modules bin Mocha, is it? It isn't. Oh, thank you. True. And just runs all your tests. Everything works nicely. And now, if you want to debug it, just use slc debug. Then add -s, which is the equivalent of debug break in a node command line, which will stop the execution of your debugged application on the first line of your source code. And you don't want to run Mocha because it's a wrapper which will start another node process that actually runs the test. You want to run _Mocha. Okay. I will see our new node inspector process. It's in _Mocha on the first line. And the thing which didn't work before was at this point we have only the Mocha file loaded in V8, and the V8 engine doesn't know about all our test files or all our test source codes. So we cannot set a breakpoint in a file which is not in V8, right? But with the new node inspector, we are populating all your source code files into a file tree. So now you can set breakpoints even in files which are not loaded yet. So I can just go to test folder, open my routes Mocha. It's not this file was fetched from the disk drive, not from the V8 engine. I can set breakpoint even in the code which is being run while you call require. This was not possible at all before. Or you can set a breakpoint in your test function. There were workarounds which allowed you to set breakpoint in your test function so you could debug test somehow. Okay, anyway, I have all my breakpoints set up, so I just hit resume. I'll have to wait for a while until database connection initialize and everything. Okay, now I can debug my code which is run when I'm requiring the module. So if I was doing some kind of like, I don't know, string manipulation or defining dynamic functions, I can even debug whether the way how it works. But I'm not more interested in my unit test, so now I can just step through all my unit test methods. Okay, and the callback was not called, and the test basically finished to completion, and I see the message detached from target because the process ended. And in the console, you can see that the trouble is the timeout is 2 seconds, which I exceeded. Yeah, but this is the way how we can debug your Mocha unit tests.
What I do is that I insert debug,
Mm-hmm.
the debugger debugs.
Yeah, debugger
called
called
I have
semicolon.
to do like 3 or 4 because one
Mm-hmm.
for some reason is not enough.
Yeah,
And then it works, you know. Then,
yeah, but then you have to change your source code
yeah.
and then remove them and not forget about them, which is, in my opinion, a bit like cumbersome. Yeah.
That's better, yeah. Definitely, this is improvement.
Okay, and the last thing, is anybody using CoffeeScript or TypeScript or LiveScript? Okay, so I have something you will like. You can even you can debug CoffeeScript in your you can debug CoffeeScript application in Node Inspector, and you can see and debug your CoffeeScript sources. You don't have to look into the transpiled JavaScript output. So let me open my CoffeeScript application. So let's say I have a simple HTTP server, nothing interesting going here, just creating a server which will call a method from a module called mod, and it will print the response. And in the module, I'm just exporting a single function just to show you how it works. And I need to compile -C for compile, -M is for generating source maps. That's the key piece of this workflow. Now I have JavaScript files, I have source map files. I can run my application. We can check that it works. Hi, hello world. This is the expected output. And now we can debug it. So slc debug. Okay, now it should work. So you can see we have the application.js file, but we also see the original CoffeeScript sources. I can set the breakpoint there. When I load the page, the breakpoint is hit in my CoffeeScript sources, I can do the usual things like step over, step into, well, this will go into HTTP in Node, which is in JavaScript. But yeah, that's CoffeeScript support. There is only one thing which is not working that great. If you want to debug your unit test written in Mocha, it doesn't work that great. Let me show you. So the trouble is when I use the debug break or debug.-s with SLC, and I stop on the first line, the application.js is loaded, and the node inspector is able to read source mapping URL and load the application CoffeeScript. But because the module file was not, coffee was not loaded yet, we don't have the association between the JavaScript file and the CoffeeScript sources. So we cannot set breakpoint in your model.coffee. You have to look at your transpile JavaScript sources, set breakpoint there. But the good news, once the module is loaded, Node Inspector will translate the breakpoint from the JavaScript into the CoffeeScript. And now, when I run the application and hit the breakpoint, it was hit in our CoffeeScript sources. So it's sort of a workaround. And I believe that's all. Do you have any questions?